Hello, everybody. It's Mimika, Cooney, and welcome back. It's been a few months since we've had the Mimika TV podcast on hold, but I'm so excited to introduce you to a new season. So, yay, welcome to season 6 of Mimika TV. I really got to that stage in my life where I started asking the questions, why am I doing what am I doing today? And after going through a really traumatic experience through the family, the loss of my mother-in-law to cancer, as well as a child in crisis with mental health issues, and then a business failure, I literally fell apart. Talk about burnout and breakdown. It's not a pretty sight, not something that I advise people to, because my drug of choice was being a workaholic. I would just push and push and push. And eventually, like my husband would say, you have two gears. You either full blast or full stop. You know, those high achievers. I'm sure you're listening there. The ones that are like, I just keep going until I fall apart. And then all I want to do on the weekend is sleep, because we just burn the candle on both ends. Well, suffice it to say, that experience really started to make me reassess my life and what I was doing and my motivations. And it really set me on the path of coaching and understanding, neuroscience. Like, I'm a total neuroscience geek. And as I say, as a recovering perfectionist and control freak, I gave up my membership to Control Freaks Anonymous. And since then, I'm so much happier. It's been so much more of a fun ride. Just really understanding that life is meant for living. There's not this giant, ticking time bomb that we feel we're so rushed to get things done, and really started to reassess what I was doing. And in the last sort of 5 years, I've really rebranded myself, reshifted, gone back to school, learned as much as I can. And that brings me to what I'm doing today, is officially known as a mindset Metacog coach, which basically means I challenge you to think about what you're thinking about. A lot of the time, for most of us, we're not aware of what we're thinking, and we just kind of go with life, and we just fall into habitual habits of doing things. And oftentimes it comes back from childhood, like what we learned in our formative years, and we don't think about as we become adults. And I like to call them the boomerang thoughts. Everyone has those negative thoughts and responses, and sometimes I call her the drama queen. She likes to be so dramatic. When something goes wrong, it's like, oh my gosh, it's terrible. The runaway train thoughts, where all of a sudden, before you know it, you've imagined the end of the world, and it's not necessarily true. Well, what I discovered is, through this process and studying how the brain works and, what drives us. Like, I'm very much come from a sports psychology mindset. So I love to be able to understand how the brain works from a neuroscience perspective, but also how we can take control of it. Because, God says in the Bible that we need to renew our mind daily, which means it's like taking a shower. Like, for most of us, we shower every day, right? We do that physically, but we don't do it mentally. And here's the thing. Your brain is one of the most important organs in your whole body. I mean, it drives your whole system. It uses 20% of your blood flow. And there's more neural pathways in your brain than there are stars in the sky. So I was like, wow, this is fascinating. If we could start to shift our thinking into, instead of, dealing with ill health once the worst has happened, what if we could preempt that, train ourselves just like an athlete to think about doing things proactively for our mental health, because mental, spiritual, emotional goes all together. We can't ignore the spiritual part, but it all works together. So that's why I'm excited about really diving into how, where the mind goes, the man or the woman follows. I do find there's a difference between men and women's brains, because physiologically there is. So, for example, women tend to ruminate a lot. Like, we tend to get an idea, or we tend to worry more. So a lot of blocks, or what we would call limiting beliefs, is ways of thinking about yourself that you think are true, but maybe aren't necessarily true. Like, for example, I'm never going to be good at math. Maybe someone told you that as when you were a child, and now your assumption about math and money and anything it's got to do with that makes you feel fearful, or you avoid it. But a limiting belief is a belief about yourself or the world or your circumstance that limits you in some way, or that stops you from reaching your potential. For example, if you believe that you want to become a professional athlete, but you've never really put in the work to do anything, kind of what we would call that wishful thinking. But if you have the skills, you have the abilities, but every time you show up to, say, go for a run or go for training, and the first thought you have is, I'm never going to be able to do this, I'm never going to win, that I'm never or negativity is really what's going to hold us back. And this is what I love about sports psychology, and we bring it into everyday life, is that, athletes have found a way to get over those limiting beliefs, because we all have them. But there's a point that happens where you make a decision. Are you going to allow it to limit you, or are you going to allow yourself to push through? Because inherently, our brain wants to keep us in comfort. Everything we do is to avoid discomfort. And most people are risk averse, which basically means they don't want to take any risks. But nothing grows in a comfort zone. We have to push ourselves past what's comfortable, past what feels good, and get into that decision-making like, nope, no matter how I feel, as much as I want to lay in bed, I'm going to get out of bed, I'm going to put my running shoes on, I'm going to go for a jog down the road, and because I know this is what's going to be better for me, even though I feel like sleeping in. So that is the difference between understanding those thoughts. That's why I say awareness is super key, that unless you're aware of what's holding you back, and sometimes it takes a bit of digging, which is what I do with my clients and my students in my programs, is to help them uncover what's holding them back. And then once you know, it's like then you can put a plan of action, and then you can decide what to work on. And I use a lot of examples. Like, I'm actually a adult figure skater, and I never learned to skate until I was like 31. But I decided I wanted to do this as a mental challenge, that if this is something I really wanted to do, no matter how I felt about myself or what background I came from, I've done classical ballet, but there was a lot more to learn. And what I've found as an adult, when you want to learn something new, you first have to undo bad habits and then train yourself through repetition and practice to do the good things, to do the good habits. But it's almost like you have to override your muscle memory. If your muscle memory is to automatically, retreat or to go into denial or to allow fear to stop you, we would never do great things. Because the difference between those who are doing and achieving well in life, doesn't make them extra special. They've just understood the concept of pushing through that pain, pushing through the uncomfortableness, and getting to the other side. And the good news is anyone can do it if we put our minds to it. This is something that Dr. Carol Dweck actually came up with quite a few years ago when she did studies with kids in school. And what she discovered, there's basically two types of learners. I mean, obviously there's a lot more detail, but just a general overview is that someone who has a fixed mindset, and it's not just for kids, it's as adults too, is someone who's unteachable. Someone who maybe feels that they can never learn new things, or maybe they're too old, or they're too set in their ways. But the good news is it's not necessarily like a thing about age. It's a thing about attitude. It's really like, are you teachable? Are you able to open yourself up to learn things? You could be 80 years old and you could learn something new. But, are we coachable? Are we teachable? Are we open to learning, which often means we have to be open to failure. And oftentimes people don't like the feeling of failure, but here's the good news. Failure isn't failure, it's experiments. Every good invention that's ever happened in the world never just came from the first try. Everything comes with experiments and trying and tweaking and learning from your mistakes. So if we can have that understanding of a growth mindset, means I might not be where I want to be, but I know I'm on my way to being where I want to be, we can start to celebrate the wins. And this is something that us recovering perfectionists don't do very well. We're not really good at celebrating when we do something well. As soon as we achieve something, we're on to the next thing. And what happens in our brain, we never allow ourselves to finish something. Like, we call it the open and closed loop concept. So if you ever watch a TV show and you wonder why something like Netflix is so addictive, is because they start the story with some kind of conflict, and the characters have to achieve something. And just before the end of that episode, they'll kind of come to some resolution. But if you notice, it doesn't just finish there, right? Oftentimes they open another loop with some more questions or some other dramatic thing that has to be answered, but they leave you with the cliffhanger. That's why we want to keep watching, is our brain is inherently built to want to find closure and solutions, and it needs to come to some kind of finish in order for it to know that this has been achieved. So if we need to reassess the way we think about things, so if we are achieving something or we have a goal, even the little things are important. We have to celebrate the baby steps. Because if you are thinking about this huge thing and you can't celebrate your growth along the way, you are always going to feel like a failure until you reach the final destination. But here's the truth, right? Life ain't a destination, it's a journey. And I know it sounds totally cliche, but it's totally true. We need to celebrate each day, like each day of growth, each month, each year. And that's how we grow and have a growth mindset, is to always remain open to learning and always remaining teachable, to say, you know what? I know I'm not where I want to be, but I sure am not where I was yesterday. So I am growing. Some tips to really help you overcome those mental blocks is your number one key is awareness, because you don't know what you don't know, right? And until you figure that out, and then you can put a plan into place. So one of the tips that I always like to encourage my clients and students to do is to actually journal, write things down. Something amazing happens in your brain when you take pen to paper and you do what I call a brain dump. Because, sometimes we can have so many ideas and thoughts and negative thoughts and to-do lists and replaying conversations, but just taking it from your head and putting it on paper is one step towards gaining peace of mind. Because then when you have it in front of you written down, first of all, it helps to slow down your thinking, and it helps you tap into your subconscious, so you can actually address the deeper issues. And I mean, I've been a journalist since I was a kid, and I always find, like, even when I was young, dear diary, you can't believe what so-and-so said to me today. And then you read it back and you go, oh my gosh, is that what I really think about this? Oh my gosh, do I really talk to myself like that? I wouldn't talk to anybody else like that. So it's putting a mirror up and saying, okay, what is actually going on in my thoughts and my head? So journaling is a really good part. And then once you can see it on pen and paper, then you can start to make sense of what needs to be addressed. Because, knowing what holds you back is, 80% of the effort that's required in order to fix it. Because once you know what to do, you can put the steps into place, and then it's just a matter of executing. Now, of course, a lot of people have a problem with execution too, because we have to worry about, we have issues like procrastination or, excuses or avoidance. But I mean, that's another conversation. We could go into a whole nother topic. But mostly what I want people to know is to overcome mental blocks really starts with, number one is awareness. Number two is then addressing those issues. And number three is just putting the pieces into place. Everybody knows that if they have a situation, oftentimes they're not exactly sure what the roots are. And I'm a very big proponent on digging into the roots so we know what the problem is, so we can get it out. Because a lot of the time we deal with the fruits, which is anger, irritation, procrastination, and we can't seem to figure out what it is that keeps driving us to repeat behaviors, right? So my process is to really start to take them and to slow them down. Because oftentimes people will say, I feel overwhelmed, I feel stuck, I feel frustrated, I'm not moving, there's no momentum. So just like when you drive a car, if you happen to get it stuck in a ditch, the worst thing you can do is apply more pressure and add more gas to the pedal, right? You're just going to end up flinging more mud and not really going anywhere. What you need is a tool that's going to pull you out of the ditch, which is usually a roadside assistance in some case, who needs to come and provide some extra push or some other tool to really get you out of that stuck situation. And then you can kind of work on cleaning things up in order to get momentum. But what we intend to do as humans is, well, this isn't working, so let me push harder or let me try harder. And Einstein has a saying, doing the same thing over and over is called insanity. So if we want a different result, we've got to do something differently. So part of the whole process is to, first of all, is to stop, take stock, figure out where you are, and then decide where you want to be. And then we'll work out the steps in between to help you take those baby steps to gain momentum. Pushing harder until you reach burnout isn't exactly the best idea either. It really is assessing, and rest is important too. Resting the mind, resting the body, and just taking some time out to take stock and to figure out where you are is the first step towards getting unstuck. Here's the thing, I kind of have like a love-hate relationship with New Year's resolutions because most people, they say that on average, people keep their resolutions for a week and then they give up and go, oh, well, it's too hard. I'm just going to, why bother? Instead of having a resolution, which is almost like a rule you make with yourself, like I'm going to stop smoking or I'm going to lose so much weight, I like to take it as more of a growth goals, because goals are great, but sometimes they can feel a little too fixed. And then if you fall fall off of momentum or you fall behind, what tends to happen is people feel they're so far behind, they can't catch up, they give up. So instead, I like to rather encourage people to pursue growth goals. Like, okay, I'm learning something about where I'm at. I'm not where I was, but I'm on the way to where I'm going. So what can I do and break it down into small little chunks? Instead of thinking I want to lose 100 pounds, think about how you can lose 2 and make it achievable. Because when you achieve those little goals, you create that momentum in your brain that goes, oh, I can totally do that. And it builds confidence. So this is part of the process that I do with my clients. And I have my signature program is called Unstick Your Mind, which is a coaching program, a mentorship program, as well as the name of my podcast and my upcoming book called Unstick Your Mind, how to shift your mindset, develop grit, and break through barriers. And I'm excited for people, if they'd love to have resources, I'd love for them to get in touch with me. The best place to find me is my website, mimikacooney.com. And I have a bunch of free resources, downloads, and access to the podcast. So definitely get in touch with me, and I'd love to help.